You know, a lot of media like myself believe the era from 1974 to 1984 was the last great era of boxing. Ring Magazine was at its height. Internationally, we had some of the best fighters from the European, Asiatic, North American countries, Africa, a myriad of champions, multiple belts, multiple title fights every week, blood feuds, all kind of stuff. Now, a lot of people drew credit for this explosion, or like taking the next level, to the success of Rocky in 1976. Won the Best Picture Oscar in 1977, made a superstar of Sylvester Stallone. We all thought there was going to be a sequel. Little did we know that the sequel would be, for a lot of people, just as good or better than the original. And it had kind of a Mad Magazine style plot, and if you read the Mad Magazine version of Rocky 2, you're going to say, what came first, the parody of your own movie? Now, this was kind of interesting. At the time, it was the last movie in the Rocky franchise that was distributed solely by United Artists. Made a ton of money, $7 million to make it, very cheap, and took home internationally $200 million, which would be equate to almost more than $1 billion in 2021 money. Now, Rocky 2, of course, is the sequel to Rocky 1, starring Stallone. Again, it stars all the regular characters: Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed, Tony Burton's in it, Burgess Meredith as Rocky's manager and trainer, Burt Young, who was Rocky's wife's nondescript brother, and of course the beautiful Talia Shire as Rocky's beautiful wife Adrian. They reprised the original roles. Now, for boxing fans, it's quite interesting. The Ring Magazine Heavyweight Championship belt makes its first appearance in the series, which is a classic belt, one of the greatest title belts of all time. Now, released on June 15, 1975, in the midst of the early summer box office, it was done so to positive reviews, and again was followed 3 years later by Rocky 3. Now, in this plot, on New Year's Day in 76, Apollo Creed had successfully defended his title in a split decision against Rocky. He and Rocky are taken to the same hospital, and despite the mutual agreement not to seek a rematch, Apollo challenges Rocky again, but Rocky declines and retires from the pros. Now, Balboa's girlfriend Adrian supports his choice, as do his doctors, who go on to reveal that Rocky will require surgery for a detached retina, a condition that could lead to permanent blindness. Now, this is very commonplace in boxers of that era. A lot of boxers had to retire or went blind because of massive beatings in the ring. In a private moment, Rocky goes to see a recuperating Apollo and wants a truthful response to his question of whether Apollo gave his all in the fight. Creed, in a moment of humility, confirms that he did. Now, after The Rock is released from hospital, he enjoys the benefits of his new cash and newfound celebrity status, and the agent sees Rocky as a potential endorsement and sponsorship goldmine, and his son Walt encourages him to propose to Adrian. She happily accepts, and they marry in a small ceremony, and soon after, Adrian finds out she's pregnant. Meanwhile, fueled by hate mail, mostly from his black fans, claiming he fixed the fight in order to protect his reign as champ, Apollo becomes obsessed with the idea that a rematch is the only way to prove that Rocky's performance was a fluke. Now, determined to rectify his boxing career's only blemish, Apollo demands his team do whatever necessary to goad Rocky out of retirement, despite the pleas of his friends and family that Rocky's ability to absorb punishment is too dangerous for his chances to successfully defend the title a second time. There's a very important scene in this movie which is very realistic, where Apollo's trainer basically tells him the man kept coming. It's a very dramatic scene and well played. Carl Weathers and his trainer, his co-actor in these scenes, it seems almost like he's appealing to the black audience that's watching the show. Ali's interpretation of the Great White Hope in this case, it has nothing to do with the fact Rocky's a white contender. The man cannot be stopped, because some fighters would take a punishment and keep on kicking, which was kind of the aspect of a lot of the champions at the time. Now, Rocky at first seems unaffected by Apollo's smear campaign, but his inexperience with money caused him to run into financial problems. After several unsuccessful attempts to find employment, including in a meat factory and other locations, Rocky visits Mickey, His former trainer and manager asked Jim to talk about the possibility of fighting again. Mickey declines out of concern for Rocky's health, especially his eyesight. But he changes his mind after Apollo publicly insults Rocky. Adrian confronts Rocky about the danger of returning to boxing and reminds him of the risk to his eyesight. Rocky insists that he knows nothing else, so this is the only way he can provide for them. Adrian, disappointed at the fact that Rocky broke his promise, refuses to support him. Typical 1930s, 1940s melodrama, but it works. Now, Rocky and Mickey began training, but Rocky is unfocused due to Adrian's disapproval. Adrian's brother Paulie confronts his sister about not supporting her husband. Adrian faints during the confrontation and is rushed to hospital when she goes into labor. Despite being born premature, the baby is healthy, but Adrian falls in a coma due to a lack of blood. Rocky blames himself for what happened and refuses to leave her bedside until she wakes up. He will not go see his new baby until the baby can be together with his mother. When Adrian comes out of her coma, she finds Rocky by her bedside. And the couple are soon shown their new baby, a boy, which is named Robert Rocky Jr. Adrian gives her blessing in the famous rematch, saying win, and Rocky quickly gets in shape for the fight, which is a repeat of the running up the steps, but with a whole bunch of children to help out. Now, on Thanksgiving, the night of the match, Apollo makes a public goal of beating Rocky in no more than 2 rounds, dating back to the Alley Productions, to prove the first match going the distance was a fluke. In order to protect his vulnerable eye, Rocky opts to fight right-handed rather than natural southpaw, and there's various scenes showing how he's learning. The change leaves him a major disadvantage, and as a result he is knocked down twice by Creed and outclassed for much of the fight. Now going into 15 to the final round, Creed is well ahead on points and only needs to stay away from Balboa to win the fight by decision. However, Creed, his ego, wants to allow him to win by knockout in order to erase any doubts about his superiority and ignores his trainer's pleas to stay back. In the final round, Rocky switches back to his natural stance and in dramatic fashion, with the welling music, unleashes a series of counter-punches on Creed, and he begins to turn the tide. Both men exhausted trade punches until Rocky is able to gain the upper hand and knocks Creed down. The blow causes Rocky to also lose his balance and fall at the same time. As both men struggle to regain their feet, Rocky is able to will himself up in the count of 9, while Apollo collapses from exhaustion, giving Rocky the victory by knockout and making the new ring heavyweight champion. Rocky then gives an impassioned speech to the crowd and holds a belt over his head with a message to his wife, watching at home, "Yo, Adrian, I did it." Now, only 700 pounds of cheese would have more cheese in this movie. But you know what's coming. It's Sylvester Stallone, it's Talia Shire, it's all the tropes of the Rocky movies born in the first movie. But Rocky is the pure underdog, and like I said, the fight is, it's a setup, not a setup, but it's your typical, 1930s, 40s, William Holden, Barbara Stanwyck. If Humphrey Bogart was a heavyweight fighter, as aspects of film noir as well. But when he ends up going back as a what he called a gym rat assistant, in the famous where a real professional boxer makes fun of him because he's carrying around a spit bucket, it feels very real. Now, no offense to all the writers and directors, and let me go over some of the team that was in that. Of course, Winkler and Chardoff produce it. Again, directed by Stallone, written by Stallone, starring Stallone. But Bill Butler's cinematography is tremendous, and the great editing from Danford Green, Stafford Allen, and Jonas Hampton really stands out. Of course, you get the Bill Conti music that just rises. But what was bizarre for a lot of people, this was a full 2 hours. This is what it wasn't a short sequel like the rest of the Rocky movies. There's a full-blown plot in this. Now, Stallone's script was initially called Rocky II Redemption, but John G. Avildsen, who directed the first movie, declined because he was too busy with pre-production on Saturday Night Fever. Stallone wanted the job to wage as big a campaign as he had for the lead role in the previous film. Now, UA executives were reluctant to give the actor the directing reins because while he had previously directed the terrible drama Paradise Alley, it was not a success. However, Winkler and Chardoff understood how much of the success of the first Rocky had come from Stallone's enormous input and lobbied hard to get him the job. Listen, he played a Canadian in a British soccer movie about World War II. This is a step up for anybody. And only Stallone could direct Stallone because a lot of he did was improv. Now, the story development of evolving Rocky surprising Creed by switching to fighting right-handed was not in the original script, and only came about because of an accident while Stallone was getting in shape for the film. He had ripped his left pectoral muscle during a bench pressing contest with great bodybuilder Franco Columbu and needed surgery. Therefore, he could not fight with his left hand. Now, the film's ending fight sequence also posed a challenge because at the time Talia Shire was making another movie called Old Boyfriends and couldn't be on the set. So our scenes would show up in the last of the movie were filmed at the end of the shoot. Now, an estimated 800, and I've seen higher numbers of 1,000, school children were used as extras in the scene in which Rocky runs through Philadelphia. And I guess the amount of turnout in Philadelphia was nearly 101%. They were literally waiting hours to see this movie. Now, Bill Conti's soundtrack is tremendous, and of course the second version of Gonna Fly Now. And the album itself finished top 150 in the Billboard 200 that year. Now, Rocky made $11 million his first week, and approximately $8 million that the first 4 days. It went on to gross $85 million on North American box office and $200 million worldwide. Again, outstanding numbers. Now, Rocky returned to UA 75% of Rocky's rentals in the States and Canada, when the rule of thumb at the time that was that a sequel will only do 30-40% of the business of its predecessors. This was not say a sequel, but like Godfather 2 was a continuation. And obviously you're not going to show a 4-hour Rocky movie, but it links. You could watch Rocky 1, Rocky 2 and not lose any of the momentum. Rocky 3, that was the momentum loser for obvious reasons. Anyway, we'll get that later. Now, Rocky 2 holds a 71% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the average rating of 6.7 out of 10. I give it a 7 out of 10. Now, Janet Maslin said the film has a waxy feeling. She wrote in the New York Times, and it never comes to life the way its predecessor did. I disagree. It, for a lot of people, is even better than its predecessor, as Variety had said. Now, Gene Siskel had a 3.5 stars out of 4. What is most remarkable about Rocky 2 is that it recalls so many scenes from the original film, which is only 3 years old and was shown on national TV a year before, and yet it all works, almost every bit of it. Now, a lot of reviewers said it exploited the original and used the good vibes of that movie to continue on, but boxing can be cruel and happy at the same time, and that's what it showed. Now, obviously, didn't do as well as the Oscars as Rocky, but it won Best Picture at the American Movie Awards and won the People's Choice for Favorite Motion Picture. And now, Film.com call it the list of the top 10 films of 1979, and a very weak year for movies. So that's why Rocky did so well. Now, the sequel to Rocky was released in May '82, and a novelization was published by Ballantine in '79, with Sylvester Stallone credited as the author. The book is a first-person narrative told by Rocky itself. I've never seen that, but I would expect it's a collector's item. Now, in '87, Rocky was released based on the first 4 Rocky films, the video game. In 2002, another Rocky was released based on the first 5 Rocky films. In 2004, Rocky Legends was released based again on the first 4 Rocky films. Now, I saw this movie like I normally did at the time, movies of this with a great sound system at the Paramount Theater in Campbellton. It was a full crowd, and actually certain scenes, Apollo Creed was getting more cheers than Rocky. I can tell you it felt like a closed-circuit TV showing that we saw previously with Ali's fights and Dale dealing with Larry Holmes. Very well put together. Cinematography is very strong. And if you're a boxing fan, like I've been all my life, especially in the late 70s, it's kind of sad that we've lost all the momentum. Mike Tyson made the heavyweight division Don King fully controlled division, but at the time there were still Bob Arum and a few other people that were, promoters. But between the Black Muslims and Don King, the heavyweights went good for a while, but when Mike Tyson got the title, it was never the same because it was just basically got dark. But at the time, boxing wasn't really dark. Boxing, you look at the success of the '76 Olympics, all the fighters there. deputy world champions came from the 76 Summer Olympics in Montreal, besides the American gold medalists and the international first round, quarterfinals, semifinals. It was just tremendous. But Rocky, people of a certain age, someone over the age of 30 may not get this, think it's too cheesy, but if you're a boxing fan, it stands out. So ladies and gentlemen, that's our story about Rocky 2. If you like what we're doing, give us a like, comment, or subscribe. Have a good evening. Bye.